Hello, this is Sam with Left Voice, and I am really excited to be joined by an independent journalist, really my go-to whenever I know that something is happening in DC. Chuck Modi, thank you so much for making the time to talk.
Hey Sam, great to be here. Or appreciate the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really wanted to have you on because we hear so much about just the increasing militarization of DC, which comes as we're seeing militarization in a lot of different places, Los Angeles, Chicago. I am not in DC. I There's only so much I trust the press in DC to cover
Yeah.
things based on how everything we're seeing affects, the people. So I guess for starters, can you tell me a little bit about what has it looked like? What does a normal DC look like, and how does what is happening right now compare?
Well, it's funny you say normal DC because normal DC is probably the most militarized place in the country already. There are police everywhere, and I believe per capita the most police of anywhere. So normal DC is already abnormal, right? Now you throw on top of that you have ICE, you have the National Guard, um, Homeland Security, you have MPD given broader federal powers and direction, alphabet soup out here, and it's a full-fledged military occupation. And you could argue it was a military occupation before, right? And they've just upped those numbers. And when Trump did that, it's worth noting that there was a 30-year low in crime prior to the troops coming. But so the move wasn't, hey, what are you doing that's working well? I hear there's new resources that are helping bring down crime. Maybe you could need more resources. Maybe you could get more resources past the 30-day window that could be sustainable. And I think that's an important conversation when it costs over $1 million a day to have the National Guard here. And what could that money be used for elsewhere and for other resources?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. I was saying that I'm right outside New York. It's weird to call it normal. We see militarization so much in this country, and I'm interested in if maybe the ramping up or the militarization is something we've always sort of seen, where the difference is. Is this more ideological? Are you seeing these federal forces act more emboldened in how they deal with people on the street? Like, what does that look like?
Well, to answer your question, I think it depends on who it is. Okay.
Mhm.
ICE and the people who joined ICE signed up for that. It's like a fascist takeover, and their responses to that. We could talk about the responses in a follow-up question. The National Guard, a little bit different. I personally had conversations at downtime with National Guard because they're standing on street corners. That's all they're really doing. They're standing around. And many of them are
Mhm.
18, 19-year-old kids. They didn't sign up to be here. They are looking to get their college paid for, and they landed over here. So I think the approach is often with the National Guard is different than you're talking about ICE, and then you're talking about MPD. And MPD already has a very strong history of fascism all on its own without any additional incentive to be more fascist. I will share with you a lesson learned from the 2020 George Floyd uprising, something
Yeah.
I covered intimately over 8 months up until January 6th and beyond. And it is this. Trump's goons came for a couple of weeks. And when Mayor Bowser set up a curfew, which was usually 6 p.m., at 6:01, Trump's goons would just start beating on people. And it was in broad daylight, and people were horrified. And media cameras came and it said, "Oh my God, look what's going on! Trump's America," as they should, as they should. And then what happened is, Trump did his thing. His goons left. His federal goons left, and MPD was there. And for the next, 7 months, MPD was no better. They were sneakier. They did their brutality and their mass arrests at night, often at 2 in the morning when there were encampments, often after media left. They're very media conscious. So the public didn't see that. And it's important to know, when you're talking about policing, and there was a lot of tear gas and there was a lot of rubber bullets. Talk about policing, you're talking about most individuals are just Trump with a gun. If we're really being honest about it, they don't change so much according to the administration, the police themselves. And I think that's really important at this time where while we are protesting Trump's federal actions, while we're definitely doing that, once you have an increase of police, it doesn't matter who the administration is. They have to find a reason to keep employing you. Police budgets don't go down. They only stay going up. So this is a continual bipartisan effort in many ways. And then when you add in the local collaboration in DC, then we have to look at it as policing. And this is not to let Trump off the hook in any way. He's a fascist. He's everything that has been said about Trump's fascism, about his Gestapo tactics. It's all true, but we know that, right? And maybe people aren't as aware about policing in general and local collaboration.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that in 2020 because, yeah, as we saw, there was more of a consciousness of just the systemic problem of policing, and that you really can't reform it. That these are just repressive forces.
Yeah.
I'm interested if and how some of that is being taken up by people who have been protesting in DC, or if these conversations are reemerging in any way after really being co-opted and just not generating as much interest while Biden was president.
That's the case. I think, you mentioned Biden. Once he became president after this incredible uprising, he said at the State of the Union address, we have to fund the police, fund the police, fund the police, right? And that is backed up also in both. There's this week, Police Appreciation Week, both in May. It's May every year, and both this year in May and last year in May, both times the Democrats issued a statement saying Republicans are trying to defund the police and we are going to fund the police even more. Meaning you can't beat Trump on his bigotry. It's impossible to do so. You can't out Trump Trump. So the only thing the Democrats can do to show allegiance to police forces that often own them, we're getting into police unions and other things, is to say, well, my budget will be more bigoted than yours. That's how they often move forward. So right now we're trying to move forward and fight this. And there are many forces. The people on the ground are fighting it. That's the good news here. And in many ways, creating a blueprint for other local areas.
Yeah, can you get into that more? Because I'm sure there's a mix of maybe people who are more anti-capitalist or abolitionist or understand the systemic issues, and then people who are maybe politicizing a bit more in this current moment. Like, what has what has the organizing looked like? What are the different sectors taking this up, and what conversations come about from that?
Sure. Well, first of all, polls show 80% of DC is against the federal takeover. So let's start right there. And we have all types of protests and cop watches and court watches. So let me start with Free DC, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, two organizations and coalitions that are and have been working very hard to prepare for this moment. And by the way, many months before this moment. And so you're going to see rapid response teams. Harry's Wildest Dreams has done that for quite some time, and Court Watch for some time, and Cop Watch trainings for some time. Free DC is part of this coalition. If you go online to the Free DC calendar, you can see on any given day there's some kind of protest for political education or know your rights training or something about Cop Watch or a protest. We see that. We see protests like throughout the week. On Tuesday, I was at Georgetown University, Howard University. Actually, I missed Georgetown. Georgetown started a walkout. Then it was Howard, who was second in that walkout at 11 a.m. And then it was George Washington University at 1 a.m. Then it was American University. I caught the last three. And they all walked out in protest of the federal occupation and not extending this occupation. So the young college kids are involved. You could go. There have been multiple go-go protests. For those who don't know about go-go, who might be watching. It's sort of improvisational music that's part of DC, history of DC. Think Chuck Brown, for those who might know Chuck Brown. And go-go's a big part of DC. So you'll go to a protest and you'll hear music and you're like, what kind of, protest is this? And in between, it'll be about free DC, don't occupy us. But they're making a statement and saying, you're not going to steal our joy. We're out here. You say go home, we're going to be out here and we're going to have fun and we're going to protect DC and we're not going to let you take our city or our joy. So you see protests in that vein as well. You see a huge rally on Saturday, tens of thousands. It was absolutely beautiful. You could go on social media and just see the size of the crowd, which is absolutely incredible. You have court watches. I'm on a sort of a independent media team in DC. Many are doing not court watch. That's happening too. Cop watch from midnight to 4 a.m. And going to where there might be a checkpoint is. And then you have that's a media team. There's also the veterans. Many veterans. If you look up a group Flare, they're in Union Station. They've been camped out there, and they have specific roles. So they may go up to the National Guard and go up to ICE. Now, when they go up to ICE, they're harassing them. I mean, I don't know how you harass, but they're heckling them. And they're heckling them till they leave and go home. And probably others might get arrested at the level of heckling, but it's a bad look to arrest veterans. So they don't get arrested, and they're disrupting many checkpoints. You're going to get a notice in your phone. There are people surrounding this checkpoint, and there's going to be a response team. Unfortunately, you don't get to everyone, but you get to mitigate some of it. But the vets might have a different approach with the National Guard. They're going to educate the National Guard. I told you they're kind of young kids who didn't really sign up for it. And they may say, this is how you refuse an order. If you believe you're given an illegal order, I want to let you know, as a 25-year Marine, how to refuse it. Call what number to call. What's the proper way? So in a way that maybe doesn't harm you and get a dishonorable discharge. These are your rights, and this is the way to go about it. So there's a political education in talking to the National Guard. And these are just some of the few of the many varieties of protest, political education, interventions. And then finally, I would have to mention court watch, usually on Mondays, because you have a big pileup over the weekend. It might be usually 106 last week. We're going to go see in front of the judge. So people will be there all day. Court watch is something that really, really matters. You want to fill those courts. The judges act differently, particularly on these minor charges. Most are nonsense, trying to find a black youth who didn't had an open container, something like that. We see the ICE and doing their Gestapo tactics. So I think it's multi-layered. I had co-wrote an article in The Nation about it. So if people want to know what's going on and other people want to use some of that in their city and call organizers and learn from other organizers, then, that's something they can do. And I think that's the point of everything we're doing. And of course, we learn from a little bit from LA. Chicago might learn from DC because it's coming to your city next.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the national character because I think obviously how people are fighting where they are is important, but also having that national perspective I think is going to benefit us. I want to get a bit more into, you mentioned the checkpoints. Can you describe like what these are, how they're being used to attack people, and yeah, just what's going on with them?
Right. So these checkpoints where usually you have a group of ICE police who are there and they're going to stop, who's ever there. And the first couple of weeks, you'd see many at a checkpoint, like UN 14th was a big one because that's right in the heart of the city. And not only that, they imposed a curfew for all youth. They have curfew zones where no youth can be past a certain hour. It's usually like 8 p.m. Or something like that. So they would harass any young person in these areas. And what would happen is cop watchers and vets in particular, you'd go around and you'd start saying, get out of here. We don't want you here. You'd see these groups saying that, and they would often leave. It would actually work. Like I could tell you firsthand, I've seen it. You mitigate it. You mitigate the situation. And the vets, you just see videos, go online and see the vets just lighting into them, and then they go. Now, fascism, white supremacy tends to reinvent itself very quickly, and now you're starting to see more vans and jump outs, as vets reported to me, where they jump out. For those who don't know what a jump out is, police jump out the van and they sort of snatch you and they bring you in, and that's not new to this takeover. That's been going on in DC and other places around the country for a long time, usually in poor black neighborhoods. But what the cop watchers are trying to do is identify the checkpoints, identify where the police are congregated. You'll get in your phone in a private group encrypted group chat, you know, 14th and U. I'm just picking that one because that was a checkpoint. Not anymore. 14th and U, and people will go there, or they'll say another spot, and people will go there. So there are 8 wards in DC, and you would have cop watchers in different wards looking to help out. Like I said, that doesn't mean you could be everywhere. The abductions are real. The snatching is real, and what you're trying to do is limit that snatching.
Mhm. Have there been any particular, particularly egregious cases of repression, or have there been any cases? I've seen some reports from activists saying maybe they've been harassed or stalked. Have you seen any of that that you're able to speak to?
Well, sure. I think almost when the curfew, not the curfew, when the occupation started, only a couple of days afterwards, a beloved activist in D.C., Afeni Evans, was
Yeah.
abducted. Now, you might have seen the video, not abducted, but was tackled and attacked for alleged fare evasion. And a police officer attacked her, sprayed her pepper spray all over her body, and stayed overnight in jail. And what happened is that pepper spray, you get soaked in it. That doesn't stop burning. That continues to burn. So when Afeni came out, Afeni was burning up next day, talking about the incredible pain that she was in next day as that pepper spray soaked within her. And and let's just pretend that um, it was guilty. She was guilty. She's not, but let's just pretend. And you tackle someone to pepper spray somebody for fare evasion? Is this the world we live in? Why do we have cops in the fair? Let's take it a step further. Everything should be free. Should all be free. It really should be free. You know the cost. You're off near New York City. The subway should be free. We know what the housing costs in New York City. We know how everything is. DC should be free. So you know what? They're there to protect property. This is what they're using their force on. And the fact is, there was an incredible outpouring for Afeni because she's beloved in the DC community. But you know what? If it happened in a different place, it happened without cameras, happened and it wasn't Afeni, you know what? That person's not going to get the same attention and outpouring. I mean, from the broader world. I will say this: the protest community will treat everyone like they're a beloved activist. So when you have jail support every Monday, doesn't matter who comes out, doesn't matter if they were a protester or something else. Um, Everyone's going to get the same love. Everyone's going to get a meal and food and drink and whatever else, and be treated like a human being, not like the carceral state treats them.
Mhm. No, I mentioned I appreciate you tying in that everything should be free, because one thing I'm wondering is, and maybe this will happen later, I don't know, but how are we seeing different movements potentially, or different demands come up? For example, I don't know about DC, but I know, or actually I do know, in DC there's been connection to Palestine, same in
Oh yeah.
Chicago. I'm sure there's been all sorts of other movements or demands that people are putting forward as people are really confronting um, just these attacks by this administration. So what does that look like? These not just resisting, but also ideas of an alternative.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to your point, there's an incredible global lens. You're not going to go to a free DC protest and not hear "Free Palestine" in there through the speakers in the crowd. That's quite common. Free Congo. I think people understand within this activist community that the lens and the what do you call it? The occupiers are the same, right? The occupiers, and I didn't even get into the whole. There's a direct connection between Israeli tactics and what is tried out as a laboratory in Israel against Palestinians, and how every major metropolitan police chief goes to Israel to learn and use those same tactics and bring those same tactics back. I mean, there's a direct connection. It's not just a symbolic, and injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere, which I subscribe to, by the way, but it's far more direct than that when you're talking about policing. So let's be clear about that. And in that, I think you had a second part of the question I forgot.
Oh, just in general, right? There's ways people are resisting, but I'm wondering if similar to 2020, if there's conversations of what we need actually as an alternative, not just
Yeah.
fighting the far right, but having an
Sure.
alternative.
Well, I think one of the great things of 2020, and DC didn't get that much attention, and that's why I stayed in DC, and I live in the DC area because it was Minneapolis, not like Ferguson. I had been in Ferguson for many months, but the world focused on Ferguson, right? When George Floyd uprising happens, the center is Minneapolis, but then Portland is jumping off. Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks, and many places all around the country, protests in Buffalo, all around the country. So it's so decentralized. And I would have people in Portland, Chuck, you got to come out here. It's going crazy. And when they say going crazy, they're thinking about like violence and conflict. And I said, well, that's fine, but I could go to 10 different independent journalists and find out what's going on as I'm online. What I can't do is when, and we're in DC, we have far fewer journalists covering DC. So what happened was I stayed there, and at that time, I fell in love with the movement. And the reason I fell in love with that movement was because of not just FTP. Hey, are we allowed to curse here or no?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Not just fuck the police, which is a common chant, as you might imagine. Ice Cube wasn't the only person to say that. And, but it was, how do we replace it? So you saw everything was free. You had free food, good food, healthy food. Now you can go to a group called the Earls and get some burgers and you get some hot dogs, but also you can go and get healthy food and juices. And this was what was happening. Free coffee. Unhoused people would come there and get treated better than the city. And this is really important because this was going on for months, and there was a multi-stage effort to break down the encampments. And at that time, when they were being broken down, they tried many tactics. Mass arrest didn't work. Over 400 in the first 4 days, by the way, the vast majority curfew violation. And then you had violence. Police were just tear gas, rubber bullets, 2 in the morning, midnight. That didn't deter people. And then they started red taping you to death, right? And when I say red taping you to death, they would change the law. So they would change the law and say, hey, you're a vendor. You can't sell food here. Well, that has nothing to do with the protesters, but you just harmed the vendors who've been out here for years selling T-shirts a few blocks away. But everything here is free. Maybe you should have done your research before you tried to oppress this group. Then they learned that. Then a new law came. You can't have canopies. Oh, wow, it's going to be very hot. But the death blow, not exciting. The death blow was you can't have coolers. A week later, once you have coolers, then you couldn't have hot water. You couldn't have water because it was hot. And it sort of made me understand in a microcosm what sanctions look like at another country abroad. This is what they look like. They cut off resources to cut off a movement. And that's what actually functionally ended the huge group that was on Black Lives Matter Plaza. And I know I'm going back to 2020 and you're asking about now, but that has always been the spirit of DC. If you listen to any chants, who keep us safe? We keep us safe is the mantra. You always have medics around. If you're hurt, the medics will help you. You could get food here. You could get love here. You could be treated with respect and dignity in a way that won't happen by the city. But the reason they shut it down that way is that the protesters did something far worse than maybe going to Starbucks and breaking their window. They were giving free coffee that was hurting Starbucks' bottom line and realizing people didn't have to pay $5, $6, $7 for a cup of coffee, what they could get for free on the plaza. They wish protesters just broke Starbucks' window, but they cost them far more money than that, and that's why they broke down the protest.
No, that's a great way to put it. I think we kind of covered all the questions that I had in mind or was curious about, but if there's anything you think is important that we haven't covered, please feel free to add it before we wrap.
From an importance point of view, I would just say to any other city, look what cities have done before you. Study what they've done before you. Everyone could learn. Obviously, every local area is a little bit different, so you have to prepare for that. But you want to learn what was done because there has to be a national resistance. And the point is, it's not about DC. They picked DC because DC isn't a state and has less um, legislative resistance, and when you're getting into home rule, than the other states. So they went after a place that's vulnerable and used that as a pretext to go after other places. So expect them in your place next. It's already been happening, Baltimore, Chicago, and just be prepared and have activists talk to the people who are doing it elsewhere.
Hmm. No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.